Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Rose Show. Today we have Amanda here.
Hi.
She is going to speak on her experience with mental, emotional, physical abuse. Welcome, Amanda.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So give us a little history.
Well, I want to actually make it clear that this is in no way to
Bashing
bash
him.
him. Yeah, absolutely not. Because he did give me three beautiful boys. So
Right.
we do have to co-parent. This is in no way to bash him or bring him down or
It's just to
anything.
bring
It's to bring
awareness.
awareness.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So I met him when I was actually 17. But I didn't start dating him till I was 18. So that was that. He was 28 or 29. He was much older. So everything started like normal. You talk, you fall in love, blah blah blah. A lot of things that were red flags then that I didn't know because I was young, naive, 18, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Um, he didn't want me talking to guys. I had a guy best friend named JC, and that he has always been my best friend. And
Right.
he was like, "Oh, well, I'm not comfortable with you doing that because my ex-wife did, and she ended up cheating on me, and blah blah blah." And of course, me being the big heart person that I am, I'm like, okay, I want to believe him, you know what I mean, and give him that space. So, I kind of pushed all my friends to the back burner. And,
Mhm.
and then that actually includes my husband now because he was my friend then too. So
Wow.
like I just kind of pushed everybody in general to the back burner. And then as things progressed, like we got pregnant pretty quickly. And that was more on his part. Like he did not want me taking birth control and stuff. It was like, I don't know.
A form of control, maybe.
It was.
And
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 like
I
I
think
like I
sometimes
said,
they're not even aware that that's what they're doing. But
well, no, I wasn't aware that that's what he was
right.
doing. Like
Mm-hmm.
like I said, I'm freshly 18. Like I just wanted somebody because I dated all these kids or guys my age, and
Right.
I always got cheated on. But I mean, I spent I think 2 or 3 years in a relationship with this guy, and I got an apartment, a truck, everything for him to come home one day and see him cheating on me with some girl.
Wow.
Like, I mean, you know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
you just want something because I wanted to settle down. Like
Right.
I was young, but I was mature for my age.
Mm-hmm.
So like I just wanted to settle down. I wanted to have a family. I wanted those things. I
Right.
wanted happiness.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so like I just was like, oh, he's older, he's been through a lot. You know what I mean? Like you just try to give people the benefit of the doubt. Like I can kind of, relate to that because I've been cheated on, blah, blah, blah. So okay, cool.
And
Um,
sometimes you take into consideration their past trauma and you want to make them comfortable. So you go that extra mile.
Right,
Mm-hmm.
exactly. Because like I said, I've been cheated on. I've been, you
Right.
know what I mean? I'm like, let's do this the right way.
Right.
And he kept promising me, I'll get there. Just let me build my trust with you. That was the promise. It was eventually I can have my things back when I build that trust.
Right.
And then we get to a year, 2 years, 3 years, by, like I said, 5 months in, I was pregnant with our son that is now 12. So,
It's not like you could just
I'm
walk
taking
away.
care of his two kids that are not biologically mine.
Right.
They are at that time they were 4 and 6. You know what I mean? I'm taking care of these two girls that are biologically mine, and I'm loving them like they're mine. I'm treating them like they're mine. I'm making sure they have Christmas. I'm making sure they have birthdays. I'm making sure they have clothes, doing their hair, doing their
So
nails,
what else
playing with
was
them.
needed for that trust
Right. So
to
what else do you need me to
right? What
do?
else do you need? So how long was it into your relationship that the mental abuse started? Or do you think that it started as soon as he said
It's
you need to leave your friends behind?
Absolutely. It started as soon as that first red flag that, of course, I didn't recognize. And this is why, like, I'm such an advocate for this. Like, I have a friend, and I won't mention her name or anything. She has a 17-year-old daughter, and her boyfriend, like, downs her mother, like my friend,
Mm-hmm.
and like says all these things and does all these things. And and I'm like, you need to tell her that that is a red flag, dude. Like,
Right.
I know she's 17, she wants to be in love. I'm cool with that, but knowing what I know now, like I want to prevent her because I treat her daughter like my own. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So I'm like, you need to like tell her that's red flag.
So at what point did you like decide to draw a line in the sand and say, hey,
9 years later.
why so long?
So much like people who are narcissistic and abusive, they make you feel dependent on them. So like for the longest time, I couldn't have a job. I had to stay home with the kids. That was my job.
Mhm.
You know, I had to be at home with the kids, raise them, take care of them, make sure that they have what they need. It wasn't until I think like the economy got a little where he was like, all right, we need two incomes. And that's when I started. I think my son was, I want to say he was about a year old, maybe 18 months when I actually started fully working. Um, no, I started working, I think, at Walmart when he was a couple, like when we lived in Fruitland. It's crazy when you sit here and
So
think
do you-
about how much time really goes by.
Mhm.
You're just like, wow. But yeah, I started working when he was probably about two. It was probably about two because I remember we lived in Fruitland when he was about 2 years old. I started working at Walmart.
And how did he handle things once you got back in the workforce? Because
Oh no,
that
no, it was he told me I need to go back in the workforce. I was a very obedient wife.
right. But my
I wasn't
question
even his
is,
wife at that point in time.
if he was that controlling, I get that he made you go back to work because you needed the money, but how did he handle the fact that when you went back to work and you were interacting with
it was always an issue because like I remember when I worked at the Walmart in Salisbury, I had this guy, I worked at like the home, like with the comforters and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And there was a guy that worked in hunting and he was married, he had a daughter, you know, we always talked over kids, you know, life, stuff like that. And once in a while, he kind of just would notice I had a bad day. He didn't like my husband from the beginning. He like, as soon as he met my husband, he's like, I don't like, he told me later on in life,
Right.
obviously, he's like, I didn't like him. I didn't like his vibe,
Mhm.
which everybody told me that. My mother, which God rest her soul, she died in January. She told me that too. My mom told me. She was like, Amanda, you weren't going to listen to me. I'm like, yeah, wait. But he was like, he would notice like vibes, you know,
Mhm.
and if he noticed I had a bad day or I wasn't like happy in my chipper self, he would bring me a coffee.
Mhm.
And my husband was like, he's flirting with you. I'm like, or maybe he's just being nice.
Right.
Like there are nice people in the world.
Mhm.
And that was my husband, that was my ex-husband's thing. Like every man just wanted to get in your pants, which is why I couldn't have
Well,
a best friend that was a guy.
It was
Because
probably a reflection of how that's what
he does.
Yes.
And
that was
like
his
I said,
mindset.
right.
So he automatically assumes everyone else on the planet has that mindset.
So the funny thing is now, like I said, I was young and naive. So when me and him first started talking, there was this girl that was his quote unquote best friend, or one of his best friends, and she actually worked at Whispers. And of course, me, I'm naive. I'm like, hey, you gotta do what you gotta do. Which even today's world, you gotta do what you do. But you know, he was letting her quote unquote stay with her, and even mentioned that she would sleep in his bed with him. Of course, me being young and naive, I'm just gonna believe him. You know what I mean? He's like, oh, we don't do nothing. She's just my, you know, my best friend. She's like a little sister to me. And I'm like, okay. And then now I'm just like, you know what I mean? You just really think about it. But my main focus is like the mental control. And so the like we were together for 9 years, and it wasn't until the very last like year that's when I started I was snapping out of it. I'm like, man, I can't keep living like this.
Well,
I'm
and
a
I
good
think
person, I'm a good wife, I'm a
far
good
before
mother.
then, resentment probably started kicking in because you resent the fact that you had to give up friends. You resent that to a certain extent.
He
You had to
pulled
give
me
up
away
your
from
life.
family.
Right.
We like I said, we lived all the way in Chrisfield one time, and I remember Gabe was only a little thing, and I remember we were watching wrestling, and he went outside to talk on the phone. It wasn't a big deal because reception sucks in Chrisfield. Okay.
Mhm.
So I didn't think anything of it. And I forgot one of the wrestlers beat this other person. I don't remember, like I said, he was like not even a year old then. But I went outside to tell him, you know, hey, your guy won. Couldn't find him. So we lived down this long driveway and we had a couple of neighbors. So it was like our trailer, the other trailer, and there's one more trailer. There was a church and a house.
Mhm.
And then across the street, there was like an abandoned house. So I'm walking and walking and walking, and I'm trying to figure out where my man went. He's at this abandoned house on the phone. And I'm like, why are you way out here? Like, who
Right.
are you talking to? He says, oh, I'm talking to your aunt. And I'm like, So I called my aunt. I was mad. I called my aunt up. I said, "Were you just on the phone with my husband?" She said, "No." I said, "All right, love you, bye." Hung up the phone. And I said, "Who were you really on the phone with?" Like, and we got in a big scrap to the point he busted his phone. He was talking to somebody he wasn't supposed to.
Right.
So, but at that point, I had a kid with him. So, and I have two girls that I love as my own. So, like, my mindset was, if I leave him, I'm gonna lose my girls. And so, but like I said, back then, like I come from a broken home and I didn't want that for my kids.
Right.
Like I said, I got attached to these two girls that aren't biologically mine. I have no legal ties to these kids.
Right.
So what happens? You know what I mean? What happens? I mean, thank gosh, me and their mom get along absolutely great. But I don't, he always used to tell me, oh, I have all these ties to the FBI and this and that and the other and gangs and blah, blah, blah. So, and, I don't know what's true and what's not.
Right.
I'm just going to go on the air of caution and I'm going to believe him.
So at any point, did it ever turn physical or was it just mainly mental?
So he's thrown things at me
Mm-hmm.
when he would get drunk. I remember one night we came home from his friend's house and I was like, "Hey, can you go put some milk in this cup for Gage so I can lay him down?" He's like, "What did you say to me?" I'm like, "Can you go put some milk in the cup?" And he's like, "Don't you effing cuss at me, Mom." I'm like, "I just asked you to go put milk in the cup."
Right.
And like he got mad and I think he threw, I think it was a bottle of bleach at me or something. Like not the big bottles, but like the cleaning bleach, like in the counter, like kitchen. It never got, like, he never actually physically put his hands on me until the very end. So finally I had enough. I'm like, I'm done. I can't do this. I'm done. And he was like, "Oh," so we lived in a split house. My mom lived upstairs. My mother, my biological mother, lived upstairs, and we lived downstairs. And I was like, this is it. I'm done. You need to move. And he's like, "Oh, well, I can't live by myself. I have the heart problems, blah, blah, blah." I'm like, "All right, well, you can go move upstairs and I'll move Mom down here with me and the kids. Like, we'll be separate. You'll still be close by to the kids." Like, I was trying to be, as much as I knew he hurt me, I was trying to be cordial about it. But he didn't have it. And then I'm like, "All right, well, you can move down in the basement. You can sleep down there." That was always an issue. And then it got to the point where like he would, and a lot of it was really, really mental. So like he would keep me up to like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, threatening that he was going to go commit suicide. And then there was like a time where he kept me up and we were arguing back and forth because he swore I was talking to somebody when it was actually him that was talking to, I don't know, at least 2 or 3 different girls. And he was like, "I bet you if I hold a gun to your head, you'll talk to me." We had a gun cabinet right in our bedroom. I woke up, I said, "Go ahead." Like I got to the point where I had enough, but I couldn't do anything. I'm a mom of 3 kids. I barely made, minimum wage at the time. I couldn't just pick up and take them somewhere.
But eventually you did.
No, eventually what happened was, so like I said, it was all mental. He even threatened to smother our now 5-year-old because I locked myself in the bathroom because he was trying to pretty much rape me. And I just wanted to get away from him. So I locked myself in the bathroom. He said, "If you don't come out of this effing bathroom, I'm going to smother the baby." So of course, mom mode, I'm going to come out of the bathroom. You ain't touching my kid. I don't know how you threaten to do that to your own child, but he knew exactly what to say to get me out.
Right.
He still had that little control. And it got to the point where I came home. All I did was work, go to school, and take care of these kids. So I went to work, came home, sick with the kids, made sure they were eaten, fed, and I went to school. I went to school about 9:45 at night. So when I came home one night, we had like a sectional, and I was sitting in the corner, and my one son was sitting on one side of me. That was my now 12-year-old. My 5-year-old was a baby, so he was in the bouncer, and then my now 7-year-old was on the other side, and he was plunked out. I can't even actually really remember. Pretty sure that's where it was. My main memory of this night, he was drunk, and I could tell he was drunk, and he just kept running his mouth and running his mouth and running his mouth. And I'm the kind of person, I like to be snarky and snap back, but I was just trying to like keep my mouth shut at this point because you feel something. You feel that
you feel the
something's
tension.
not right.
Right.
Something's not right. And he snapped and he kept my son, my 12-year-old, he had fractured the growth plate in his ankle, so he was on crutches. And he kept coming up and choking me. He kept like grabbing me, grabbing my face. My son was 7. He was trying to like knock him off of me, kept
Right.
pushing him, kept kicking him, kept hitting him. And he even took the crutches and like whacked me with it. And I went to block him and like messed my elbow up pretty good. The girls that I work with, because like I said, he had threatened to kill me or hold a gun to my head, everything. And they knew.
I was going to ask if you had shared with
They
anyone.
knew. Yep, I did. I was like, I need to talk to somebody.
Mhm.
I need somebody to know that if something happens, you know,
Who
this
to
is
look,
what I need.
who to look
I
at.
need, I need somebody to help.
Right.
So we come up with this plan that if I ever text any of them 911, they knew something was bad and to call the cops. And they had my address and everything. So when he started doing this, like he started getting aggressive, he got to a point where my son got upset. So he ran and jumped on a recliner that we had or whatever. I'm like, look what you're doing. You're upsetting our son. You need to stop. Like, look what you're doing to our kid. And he was like, oh, he's just being a pussy. He's a toughen up, blah, blah, blah. Well, he turned to go like talk to him and pretty much just tell him to toughen up. And when he did that, I hurried up, snatched my phone, text one of the girls 911, and then tossed my phone behind the cushion because I knew if he saw me on my phone, he was going to snap it in half.
Right.
Like I already know what happens with him. So I hurried up and tossed it behind the phone. It was on vibrate because I keep my phone on vibrate 90% of the time anyway, but I just got home from school.
Right.
So I hurried up and texted her 911. And within like, I think 10, 15, I don't even know. It feels like forever when you're in that situation. Like it feels like it just drags because you're just like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Like, is he going to do something completely stupid before these cops get here?
Right.
And thankfully they got there, they knocked on the door and they're like, oh, we heard a disturbance. The cops handled it so amazingly. Like I don't know what I got the name of one of the cops at least. And I made sure that like I wrote him a letter, about like what happened or that, you know, that I'm okay, that I'm good and how much I appreciate him. But, they talked to him for a second and he was like, oh, we heard there was a disturbance, you know, is everything okay? And he's like, oh yeah, everything's fine. Cop's like, okay, well, can we talk to her? And he's like, oh, well, yeah, I guess. And he was like, the cops want to talk to you. So, the cops were like, hey, can you step out here for a second? I see that there's kids in there. Why don't you close the door? And I was like, all right. So, I stepped out, closed the door. They saw all the marks on my neck. I mean, he left marks. They saw. They took pictures. And then they were like, what happened? And like, I busted into tears. And I told them everything that was going on. And I'm like, they were like, are you scared? I'm like, yeah, I'm scared. Like I said, I told them, I've been trying to leave him for months. And they were like, all right, well, what we're going to do is we're going to have you step back in, have him come back out, and we're going to arrest him. I mean, they did it all discreetly, which I appreciate because nothing's more traumatic already than my 7-year-old at the time trying to beat his father off of me.
Right.
So they ended up arresting him and taking him away. They told me what to do. I needed to go file I think it's a POA or a protection order, all that stuff. So that was the very beginning of the.
A lot of people will say, how do you get yourself in that position to begin with? But this was my experience. They get you so wrapped around their finger because they can be really sweet. And then the violence just comes out of nowhere. So it sort of takes you off guard.
Oh, he's a smooth talker. He's a smooth talker.
It makes it very difficult.
Is a smooth talker.
Yeah. So do you think he's spreading that joy? I joke. It's not a joy. I'm just saying that most of the time it doesn't stop with you.
It
goes into their next relationship.
He is remarried. He is remarried.
And I understand if you don't want to speak on it because.
Well, it's not my place to say.
Right.
I can just say that I feel for his wife. He and like I said, this isn't to bash him. He says he's this changed man. He goes to church, blah blah blah. I don't see it. I don't feel it. I'm not really like high tuned with vibes, but I do pay. I mean, because of all this, I pay very close attention to things, and I just don't get it. I don't get that vibe that he has changed. And from other things that I have heard, we'll leave that he hasn't changed.
I've heard the same thing about the person that I went through this with. He hasn't either.
Yeah, well, and I mean, these
He
people
carried that right into his next relationship.
well, and he doesn't. And here's the thing: it doesn't just go into their romantic relationships.
Mm-hmm.
It goes into their relationships with their kids.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he has he has the two older girls that I've raised. They're now 19 and 17. 19-year-olds in the Marines. She just got shipped to California. I mean, she is.
So at what point,
amazing.
I can say, so what advice would you give to people? And your advice is going to be when you see that red flag, stop. But my problem with red flags is you're already attached sometimes by the time you start seeing red flags.
Absolutely. And so when I went to the courthouse and I filed this POA, like, I learned so many things. Like, you just think red flags and you're thinking, okay, they put their hands on you, or maybe they say something very vulgar. But there's things like control over financials.
Mhm.
He didn't want me working.
Mhm.
He wanted me dependent on him.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's things like that. There's things controlling the friends. Like, the woman was absolutely great. She gave me this little pamphlet, and it just goes through this everything about like red flags.
Mhm.
And it just doesn't start with emotional and it's everything.
Right.
There's so many.
But it's everything, but at the same time, it's subtle. They make it seem like you have to do it that way in order to make them feel comfortable.
Yeah, because
you know what I mean?
And like I said, he knew what I went through. And I think that's where it all starts. He started sympathizing with me.
Mhm.
Because like I started talking to him about everything, because we're trying to bond.
And then you have a commonality, and then it just sort of builds from there.
Right. So then when he starts saying about well, my ex-wife cheated on me, she did this, she did that, blah, 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 then, you just like, oh, I can relate to that. So
Right.
you want to make him happy because you think that you're going to be happy in return.
Right.
And it's just not like that. And I mean, there were so many things like, him talking to this girl. It was his quote unquote best friend. And
so he was allowed to have female friends, but you weren't allowed to have male friends or any friends.
It wasn't really allowed to. It was, he did it behind my back. So what happened was he got really drunk one night, and she was texting him off of Facebook. Well, his Facebook was linked, or his phone, Facebook, or whatever. It was all linked to his tablet.
Mm-hmm.
His tablet kept going off. I'm like, who are you talking to at like 12 o'clock in the morning? So I just go slide it, and open the iPad, and she's like, oh, I see that you're really happy. Oh no, not really. How are you not really happy, but talking about having another kid with me? Like, if you're not happy, why are we talking about having another baby? Like, just things like that. I remember I got so mad at him. I locked him out of the house. It was February. It was raining. I wouldn't live back in the house until the cop showed up and said that there was a disturbance in the area because he kept going and banging on all the neighbors' doors. I tried to get the cop to take him at that time, but he's like, nah, he's in bed, he's good. Yeah.
So what advice would you offer to the listeners when it comes to starting a relationship, looking at the red flags? Because it's hard. Once those emotions get involved, those blinders come on, and there are a lot of things that you ignore.
So definitely, I mean, sometimes everything starts with us, our generation, right? To teach the younger generation. So that's why, like with my friend, I'm like, hey, you need to teach her these are red flags. And my daughter's my biological daughter that I have now with my husband is 2. But when she gets to that point, it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be, mommy's going to show you that these are red flags. Like, and like I told my friend the other day, I'm like, if her boyfriend can treat her mother, which is my friend, because he treats her like crap, like just the way he talks down to her. I said, you need to show her that if you're someone who truly loves you and cares for you, is going to treat your family like their own. So if he's talking down to you, what is he going to do to her? You know what I mean? Like, these are all things. And I mean, in our, like, as far as older people, I just research red flags, because you'd be surprised, like, what exactly is a red flag. But when it comes to our children, we need to teach them. You don't think about that. You don't think about teaching your kids red flags in a relationship.
And I think we need to teach our sons
Oh, my boys know better.
And our daughters, because I've always told my daughter, but my son and my daughter, you don't hit, a man does not hit a woman, and a woman shouldn't hit a man, because I mean, it's just, no, it's not what you do. It is not what you
So
do.
here, I have a 5-year-old, and his nickname is Chucky. And here's where this mom thing comes in. I am petrified that this little boy is going to turn out just like his father. I am so scared. And I'm doing everything that I can to raise them the right. Like, I teach my children, and I tell them, no, he had this habit of going up and choking my 2-year-old daughter. And I don't know where he learned it. I don't know. I can't speak. I'm not worth their dads. I don't know what they see there. I'm hoping and praying they don't see that, considering their stepmom worked.
Well, how old was he when you were with
He
your
was
ex-husband?
he was a baby.
So he wouldn't have
I don't know.
processed what was happening.
You don't ever know. You really don't know what children observe, even at that age. I mean, because kids are sponges when they're that little, right?
They
So, I mean, I'm pretty sure I remember him being asleep. This has been a long time ago now, and I try to push a lot of it out. But I mean, then again, my 12-year-old saw all of it, and he is the most
Children are very
child
different.
ever.
They'll either keep that cycle going, or they'll go, you know what, I'm not going to do that. I've watched it happen, and I've experienced it, and I don't want anyone else to experience it.
And I believe that children, so the point was, okay, so he kept doing this, and I tried everything. I tried correcting him. I tried just, hey, we don't hit nobody like that, especially our sisters. It's not nice. You're supposed to love her. I even busted his butt one time. I'm like, all right, nothing else is working. Don't do this.
Right.
And finally it got to the point where and I turned around and I looked at my daughter one day. I said, when brother comes up to you like this, and gestured him coming up to her to choke her, I said, you turn around, you take your hand and you pop him.
Right.
And I hate doing that. Like, but I want her, this is now where you got to learn self-defense.
Right.
So, and of course, one day he did. He went up to her and she punched him right in the nose. He ain't messed with her since.
It's hard, I mean, to teach self-defense. You have to defend yourself, but at the same time, I mean, I don't feel that a girl should just walk up to a guy when they're in the middle of a verbal altercation and knock the shit out of him.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
However, if the guy walks up to you and he knocks the shit out of you and you feel you can take him, I mean,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
Trying.
Go ahead. Let me ask you this, because that makes me think of this now. Do you feel... So I feel that I've learned to control my emotions because I've watched someone who can't, and to me, it's very unattractive. Because whenever my mind would get violent, it was to me just such a turnoff. And I thought, I don't ever want to be that. So do you feel that your ex has helped you communicate better and control?
Absolutely not.
No.
My husband is what helped me communicate better. Because when things got tough, even when we did fight a little bit and things got a little rough, after we calmed down, he would come back and be like, look, this is what we need to do. He's like, I don't want to lose you. He's like, you and these kids are everything to me. He's like, this is what we need to do. And he's like, I need you to be more open with me. I need you to tell me what you're thinking. I need you to tell me how you're feeling. I can communicate. I have a trouble talking about my feelings and thoughts because when I was with my ex-husband, I wasn't pretty much allowed to have my own feelings and thoughts. I needed to think and feel exactly how he did. So, and to the point, I just kept my mouth shut and just went along with whatever he said. Again, the good obedient wife, right? Right. My husband now is like, no, that's not how this works. You need to tell me what is wrong.
Right, because they're not mind readers.
He knows if there's something wrong. Right. And that's the scary thing. And I think that's what having the perfect person is. They know. He knows if I'm in my head. He knows if I'm depressed. He knows if my anxiety's up. And he's like, hey, what's wrong? And if I turn around and be like, nothing, I'm fine, he'd be like, bullshit. Right. He calls me right out on it. Right. He's like, bullshit, what's wrong?
Well, if they care, they know because they're observant.
Absolutely.
Yes.
But he also knows, like, if he says it in front of the children, I don't like having conversations in front of my children. When that day that I threw rocks at his truck, our daughter was home and she's only 2, but still, like, I cried my eyes out because I acted like that in front of her. I literally threw her in my truck and took her to McDonald's and got her a Happy Meal because I felt so bad. Right. I was like, we're going to go get lunch. Mommy's very sorry. Mommy shouldn't have done that.
So what lesson did you take from the ex? I mean, what lesson did you take from that relationship? Because you have to have a
Never-
lesson or there's just no growth. And it sounds like you've grown.
I've grown a lot. Never let anybody change who you are. Never let them do that. Because even, I mean, I wasn't as like spunky. My stepmom, my mom, she was a badass. I mean, she's been through it.
Mhm.
She's been through abusive husbands. She's been through cancer. She went through so much stuff in her life. And my sister is about as mean as a bucket of rattlesnakes. So I was already kind of learning from them to be on my own, like how to be independent.
Mhm.
But when I met him, it felt like all that reverted. You know what I mean? Like I just didn't know what was true and what wasn't anymore.
Mhm.
Because you got people telling you, oh, you got to be a good wife, you got to do this, you got to do that. And I got my sister and my mom like, no, like it's partnership. You can still be independent. So I feel like I did. I let him change who I was then. Maybe for the better now, maybe for the worse. I'm not really quite sure.
So in some areas good, in some areas not so good.
Yeah, I was always the kind of person that just, and my 12-year-old's the same. My 12-year-old's a rabbit love me. You want to just make everybody happy. You want everybody to be your friend. You know what I mean? Like,
No, you don't.
yeah, I've learned that now. I've learned that now. I don't care if you like me
No,
now,
you
like
don't.
whatever. But my 12-year-old's the same way. Like he doesn't want people to not like him. He just wants people
He's
to
a
be
people
happy.
pleaser.
He's a people pleaser. And that's how exactly I was. I was a people pleaser. My mom used to say, even when I was a teenager, she's like, you mother everything. And I did.
Right.
Which is what I think that's why I wanted to be with an older person, because I did mother everything. I wanted to be a mom. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So it was like a second nature for me.
Right.
But I did let him change who I was to an extent. And I think that's, I mean, and it makes sense now. People are supposed to love you for who you are, right?
Mhm.
So why did I let him change me?
Well, because I think that we're always changing for the better. At least we're trying to grow. And I'm not saying that. So I'm just speaking to the fact that you said, I let him change me. Well, people come into your life and they change things about you that are normally, if you're doing it right, a positive change. You know what I mean? But it sounds to me like he was doing the opposite of everything that you were taught.
And
he was making you dependent on him, which is
absolutely
what they do. Well, Amanda, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story and giving, some advice, some feedback. And
yeah,
definitely, it's
think
all about
everybody-
teaching our children to be better people.
and learning ourselves.
Mhm.
I feel like, my mother, my biological mother, she didn't teach me anything. You know what I mean? She's
Right.
handicapped. And I wish I would have been wise enough then. So search those things.
Right.
So younger generations, like if you're in your 20s, search it, man. Just what are red flags? What's a healthy relationship?
Right.
It sounds stupid, but I think it's really, really important
Mhm.
for yourself.
Mhm.
I mean, because I'm gonna tell you what, I don't ever want anybody to have to deal with the stuff that I deal with in my head half the time.
Right.
And that's one of the biggest things. And that's probably something else too. I don't talk about. I call them my demons.
Mhm.
And I don't want anybody to have those because of
Right.
going through something like that. So
Not if you can bring awareness.
no,
Yeah.
no, search it. Search
Yeah.
red flags. Search everything. And if the ex-wife tells you something, believe it.
Yeah, they're not just saying that because, they want him back.
Nope.
No.
Nope.
All right. Well, thank you.
No problem.